Now, this book started basically, it was supposed to be a collection of interviews, wasn't it? And basically you took the introduction and turned it into a book. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, it started out, and the idea was to do a collection of all the interviews I've done over the year with, with things like Newsarama and websites and a bunch of the journalists that I've worked with. And they asked me to do a new introduction for it, and I thought, yeah, this is going to be easy. So I did my introduction, and then suddenly everyone said, we want more original material, and 18 months later I found myself deep into this gigantic tome. So as I've said a lot, I didn't expect to do it, but I'm really glad that I finally finished it, and it's out now. So.
Now, you talk about how this is such a pure art form that there is no, marketing people from Hollywood, very few editing ideals that we can really let loose, but why do you think there's still kind of an embarrassment with comic books in many areas, especially in the US, which basically created the genre?
Well, basically because in the 1950s, comic books were held up as the scourge of society, and they never quite recovered from that. And we went around at the time, but the stuff I've read about it was really terrible. People looked on comics as corruptors of children and as destroyers of youth. And so that kind of, they were being burned on bonfires in the 50s in the same way the Beatles albums were being burned 10 years later on bonfires. But though the Beatles were recapitulated, the comics never were. And they've always had that, I think, that aura of the disreputable about them that has never gone away, even when so many great creators have come in and tried to change things and make it a bit more of an art form. It's always, maintained that atmosphere of something dodgy and unnatural about this form. So I think we've never recovered from that. It'd be nice to think that we might be able to in the future, but certainly it's hung over comics for a long time.
Do you think the new movies are helping that at all?
I don't know if the movies are helping comics. They're certainly helping superheroes to move off the comic page and into the real world, but whether that will feeds back into comics, it's hard to say. But hopefully, we've got the movies, we've got things like this book, which may introduce a whole new audience to something that they've been ignoring for a while.
With this relaunch and with happening with DC Comics, and also in the book, you talk about how superheroes will change and morph and everything. Do you think there's still a core with different characters? I mean, is there something that just will always be Superman and can't change?
Yeah, I think there are certain elements of Superman that don't really change much, but it's hard to say what they were. I wrote a whole book trying to identify that, and when I was doing All-Star Superman, I was trying to get down to the basic core for me of Superman is that simply that in any given era he represents the best of what we can be. He's the highest human aspiration. So in some eras, say in the 40s, the highest aspiration is to be a good patriot. So Superman's a good patriot. In the 30s, the highest aspiration was to be a defender of the poor and a champion of the common man. So he was that. In the 60s, he was a cosmic seeker. In the 80s, he was a yuppie. Right. So he always kind of represents our highest ideal of what we could be at any given time.
And now in the new relaunch, we've heard that his parents are going to be gone again, as they were pre-crisis. He's going to be a little more isolated. Is there a danger he's going to become too close to Batman?
Well, certainly. I mean, I wouldn't say that anything that I'm writing in the new stuff is anything like Batman. He's not that character at all. He's a much more... Even though he's a more isolated character, he's still upbeat, because you've got to remember that no matter how isolated Superman is, he always stands for the best. So although Batman only lost 2 people, Superman lost millions, billions of Kryptonians. I mean, that guy really suffered. He's always been in a much worse place than Batman, but at the same time he's always had a very different way of dealing with it. So we're not going to see a brooding Superman crouched on gargoyles or any of that.
And my last quick question, what do you think of the new Dr. Matt Smith?
I think it's brilliant. I just love the whole new Doctor thing. The stuff that Stephen Moffat's been doing, I think, is the best in years. And I've been a fan of Doctor Who all my life, but I think Matt Smith is possibly the ultimate Doctor Who. Basically, I've been loving it. I think it's great.
Well, I really keep hoping that we adapt one of your stories from the old days, from the old Doctor Who comics, into an episode or something. I would love to see your work on Doctor Who.
Well, I'd love to write one. I've got a great idea, but I'll wait and see. Maybe the phone will ring one day.